Hi everyone. It's now 3 o'clock. You've dialed in at exactly the right time, so congratulations on getting your Timeliness Award. Welcome to you all once again. We're going to be digging deeper into a topic that's on everyone's minds right now, large language models and how ready we and our data are when it comes to quality, privacy and governance. If I could ask, please, my panelists to switch their cameras on, that would be marvelous. Hello. I'd like to welcome our two panelists today, Fiona Browne of Datactics and Peggy Tsai of BigID. Firstly, with Fiona, she's CTO at Datactics with over 18 years experience in research and industry, specializing in the pragmatic use of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Fiona is a former lecturer in computing science at Ulster University, focusing on applied AI and data integration, and previously was a research fellow at Queen's University Belfast. Fiona, welcome.
Thank you, Matt.
My pleasure. Peggy Tsai is CDO at BigID. She too has over 18 years experience in data management, stewardship and governance at major financial firms. Peggy has a master's in information systems from NYU and a BA in economics from Cornell. She's also an adjunct faculty member at Carnegie Mellon Heinz College for their CDO certification program. Peggy, a very warm welcome to you also.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Fiona.
You are so welcome. So I think the best way to tee off this webinar today, before we get stuck in, is with a poll. I'm going to launch a poll concerning the extent to which you are aware of LLMs. So here we go, I'm going to launch it. And while that's there, hopefully you can see it. If not, it's going to be a fairly sad poll. While that's there, I'm just going to go over the topic a little bit today. I'm Matt Flemley. I look after marketing here at Datactics, and I'm joined by our panelists and also Jamie Gordon, who's in my team, looks after partnerships, and he'll also be handling all the Q&A today. A reminder of today's topic and why we're all here. Now, the four of us have been talking for some time about the intersections in data management between quality, governance, and privacy. And at our recent London event, Peggy and I talked about getting Fiona and Peggy together to discuss this particular topic, the preparation of data for AI, ensuring quality, privacy, and governance, particularly concerning LLM readiness. As a reminder, I'm just going to say, please do ask questions as we go, and Jamie is going to collate these and I'll ask them at the end. So with our poll, let's have a look and see what the results have shown. I'm going to hit view results. It's probably me that can see results, so I'm going to tell you what the results are. As it currently stands, we have no people saying very little, I'm only just discovering. 17% have said that they are somewhat aware. They've started experimenting with ChatGPT in their role, for example. 17% equally saying that they use co-pilots or LLM-aided content regularly. Half of all people have said that they're exploring custom LLMs. And again, a similar 17% saying they've deployed custom LLMs in their role. So as a bit of an opener, Peggy, what do you make of that from an awareness perspective? I realize I've just given you a whole load of numbers, but the majority of people saying that they are exploring custom LLMs, but pretty much everybody has some level of awareness of the topic as it currently stands.
I think those are really great poll numbers because it shows that even from a personal day-to-day level, people have either tried or experimented with using the different, with ChatGPT and Bard being so prevalent. It's great to see those numbers, and I'm happy that people are here because they want to explore and further the utilization of these technologies in their organization. So I think this is the great audience to have today's discussion with.
Thanks, Peggy. Fiona, same question to you. What do you make of the outcome there?
Yeah, this is great and very informative, and will help shape the conversation going forward as well. So this year has been a super busy year with all of the explosion of LLMs, from your OpenAI to Anthropics, and through to Minstrel. So we've seen a lot of hype, but what we're seeing from this poll here is that organizations are now more focused on the operational capabilities of these models, and aligning it to their business goals. So applying it to areas, for example, maybe there's a manual process that you can now automate with these models, maybe improve the accuracy of a process. I see co-pilots there, so maybe generating computer code, summarizing text, improving and reformatting documents, performance analysis. So it's very clear that the audience here is very hands-on with these technologies.
That's great. Thank you so much. And that leads really nicely into what's going to be our first question/discussion topic, because the intention here is to sort of throw between the two of you as we go, so feel free to. And I'm going to ask this to Peggy first then. So to what extent would you say does the complexity of the modern data landscape affect large language models, and why does this matter? Can you tell me a bit, what are the challenges, benefits, and risks? And feel free to ask me to flick through some of the slides I know you submitted beforehand.
Sure, thank you, Matt. And before I begin, I think this having Fiona and I lead this discussion is very appropriate, with Fiona's background in artificial intelligence and really my background in the application and operationalization of data management. So it really is, when we're talking about these large language models, it really all starts with the data, right? The complex data landscape that organizations have, and how they're going to really begin their preparation of building out these models. I think that's really the focus of today's topic, is really the data preparation and what needs to go in to ensure the trust and accuracy of any model, AI algorithm system that you're building. So to further that point, I just want to go to the next slide to really talk about, really where data is. And I think anyone in the audience that is, working with data, you're a data practitioner, you're in a regulated industry, that data is really the most important ingredient to help make informed decisions and take action in your organization. So I think what has shaped a lot of the regulated industries so far, and I think AI is going to be another part of the additional regulation that's coming down the pipeline. But I've worked in financial services companies before, and regulation compliance is not a new thing, right? We've all had to deal with different types of regulations, and really that shaped the way that we've had to really be rigorous about building out our data management, data governance programs, and to really think now that privacy has also kind of reshaped all industries in terms of how they're collecting their personal data and sensitive data, and being aware of how that's utilized in their reports, and now also being aware of how private sensitive information is utilized in large language models as well. So having that additional caution is very critical. So I think that for those of you who worked in regulated industries, we have that awareness, but how do we now take that forward as we build into the new AI era is really important. Mm-hmm. The second trend I see really in data is around the protection and security of our data. And I think that is first and foremost for all organizations that are concerned with their crown jewels, quote unquote, and really being able to ensure that there are the right controls and policies in place to protect the data. And I know that a lot of the larger enterprise open language models will have the privacy and security built into place. But I think for those in the audience who are thinking about building their own custom large language models, I think that privacy and security are still issues that they need to be aware of. The third piece is around cloud migration. And this speaks to the point of where organizations have a lot of complex data. And these variety of data sources, data types, structured data, unstructured data, it can live and be stored not only on-prem, on your on-prem applications and systems, but it's also in your cloud. And I think that's what makes data governance so difficult, is not really knowing where your data is, and then bringing the full value of that data into your analysis, into your AI algorithms is really going to be the biggest challenge in fully utilizing the power of not just the AI technology, but also the power of your existing technology. And last but not least, as Fiona said, everyone is talking about AI. It's the biggest topic of the year. Every conference I go to, Fiona, I'm sure you see this as well. Everyone is talking about generative AI, but how do we get started? I think that is another big challenge. While a lot of the discussions have been about trust, transparency, accountability, ethical usage, I think it's up to us, the data practitioners, to take that down to another level and ensure the practical usage and applying those principles to our day-to-day work is really critical. Next slide. So this is where, I think a really interesting point that I've heard and seen from many of customers that I talk to that are building out large language models is that they have a good idea of where their data is when it comes to structured relational databases. I think that the biggest challenge and risk is actually in their unstructured data. This is still very common in many industries where people in the field are still writing notes and they need the time to transcribe it and to relate the unstructured data into their structured data, or that's where a lot of the untapped information is really living in the organization. But you're talking about a majority of a company's data being in unstructured. So it can be in file shares, it can be in emails, text messages. These are all proprietary company intellectual property that is untapped and unharnessed. So how do organizations really take advantage of this information and to deepen the contextual knowledge that's behind a lot of their data? And that is where, again, more automation, more technology needs to be put in place in the data preparation and specifically classifying the data. So this is where you can have all different types of documents, but not really knowing exactly what's inside those documents. Oftentimes in my past, when I was working in financial services companies, I literally had to read through a lot of the documents and figure out what is the topic, what's the business attributes, what's the privacy sensitivity, what's the confidentiality score of these documents, and how it can be used. So being able to accelerate that classification process is going to be another key to unlocking the real benefits of AI and the generative AI. And just lastly, one more point in my next slide that I see a lot of organizations doing is focusing on the efficiency. And today we'll talk about some of the efficiency use cases that we see across organizations, but it's also about being effective and being able to scale and grow the way that you are currently preparing your data and being able to accelerate those use cases, not just in bits and silos, which is what's really been happening all year, but I think in 2024, really being able to scale and accelerate those use cases across the entire enterprise, as well as at the same time understanding the risk and the privacy security issues that those guardrails need to be put in place as well. So hopefully, Matt, I've shared a little bit of my insights, but I'd really love to hear from Fiona, her perspective on the challenges as well.
Completely, yeah. No, I really appreciate that, and I think that funny, Fiona and I were having this conversation just yesterday when it came to even building out our own LLMs that relate to documentation internally, etc. Making sure that you start from a robust policy perspective, because the opportunity, particularly with LLMs, is so open that you just introduce a whole load of risk unless you have those guardrails, as you say, in place. So you're absolutely right, Peggy. handing to Fiona to have her thoughts on the same question. What would you add, Fiona, when it comes to the complexity of the modern data landscape? Your role and Datactics' role within that, and why it matters. Could you perhaps share some of the challenges, benefits, and risks as well? And again, feel free to ask me to skip through the slides as we go.
Sure. Thanks very much, Matt, and that was superb. Peggy, it's great to have a practitioner on the call here talking to the data, the challenges, highlighting that these are not necessarily new, and bringing that experience then with us. So yeah, at Datactics, we use and we build ML models. It's a really interesting time because we're now talking about Gen AI, but we also have machine learning AI, which has been around a while as well. So I refer to like Gen AI and traditional ML, and really I think the difference between the two is that barrier to adoption. So now with these LLM models, this barrier has been significantly lowered. You don't need to be a data scientist or have a PhD in AI, and you don't need to have vast amounts of data to train and build a model. So essentially what we're doing is that we're taking these models and we're putting a wrapper around them. We're making them customizable and we're making them useful for us. And the reason why they're useful for us is because we're training them on our specific data set then. So if you're subject matter expert and you really know your core business goals, then you're in a really good position to make use of these models because you're in a good place to measure that quality of the data that's going in to these models and actually to measure the business value that's produced at the end. So Matt, if I could get you to move on to the next slide, please. So this Gartner wheel here really summarizes well in terms of the use of artificial intelligence and LLMs and the number of areas that this covers in your organization. So you can see there we've got one part of the puzzle is the AI solutions. So that's starting with your use cases. As Peggy had said, we're going to see those increase as we progress over the year and we have successful POCs. Then the next area is that the AI techniques and foundations. So that talks to the data landscape that we currently play in. It also covers, for example, the infrastructure that's required in areas such as security as well. And then the bottom part of the completion of the wheel is that AI governance. So this covers things such as ethical approaches to the implementation of this technology. What's the strategy of your organization to implement this? Imbuing those skills across the organization in terms of building and using these models to the use of the results and of course that authentication and security aspect then as well. If we move to the next slide, please. And essentially what this all boils down to is your data assets and governance, and that's governance across your data management landscape, which is going to play a really important role in ensuring responsible usage of these technologies, compliance to regulations, protection to the users and trusted outcomes of the application of AI and ML. And the final slide, Matt. So I think I'm echoing what Peggy has said here, that AI actually fits quite well within your typical governance framework, covering those three areas of your data that we've discussed, the models themselves, and the governance that wraps around this. So we have a very similar slide here, Peggy, on the different aspects, and I'm going to take a more technology focus on this. So we've always had policies, guidelines, standards. Exciting time for us. We have new evolving policies, regulations. So, for example, there on Friday night, Saturday morning, we had the EU AI Act, the provisional release of this come out, and that's probably one of the first regulations now that that we have in the area. It's been in the works for a number of years now. Compliance to the data side of it as well, such as GDPR and understanding what your company policies and ownership are to essentially the data that you're using to feed into these models. As Peggy really succinctly had said, we've got such a fragmented data landscape where we can obtain information and knowledge to feed into these models. That both comes from unstructured and structured data. And it also comes from systems, for example, legacy systems, right through to your nice new systems such as Snowflake and Databricks and so on. And there's a wealth of knowledge distributed across an institution's data landscape. And it's identifying these and collating these together in order to train these models and to provide that USP or customization for the applications that you're building. Data plays a central role in this. So, for example, your training data sets, your test data sets, and we need transparency around this. It not only plays to good practice, but it's going to play into regulations that are out and are coming. So, for example, we've often talked about data cards, where it's documentation around where the data has come from, that's been used to train your models. What are the features used? What are there any PII in this data? Linking all that together to essentially your data management ecosystem. For example, the lineage of that data, highlighting any sensitive data and so on. And within now the world of AI, we've got new metrics. So we've got very common data quality metrics such as accuracy, completeness, and so on. But we've got new metrics as well around ethical issues around your data and measures around that. Fairness and so on. So these can all build to good documentation about the data that's been used to feed the model, because that will be important for standing over the outputs of these models further downstream. An area to hit on as well is the security of your data. So often we are asked about any models that we deploy, is information about, how safe and secure is this model? How safe and secure is my data that I'm feeding into this model as well? So, for example, do you have data that whenever it's addressed, it's encrypted, but it's also encrypted whenever it's in transit as well? A big question that we're often asked is, are you using my data to train the model? So being able to answer, very clearly that your data isn't used and retained to train a model is very important for our clients, especially in regulated areas. And again, that wider aspect of that lineage and provenance is important here. What I was talking about in terms of the deployment of the models, this is where your data quality and the documentation plays into here as well. So being able to stand over a prediction that's been made or an output that's been made and provide that traceability and that right to understand the predictions, especially in these more high risk categories, as highlighted in the EU AI Act.
Brilliant. I think you've touched quite a lot on regulations there. And again, part of our conversations over the last few weeks have really been triggered by, I suppose, when blockchain became a thing, companies weren't having to come up with, an employee blockchain usage policy. Whereas compared with something like LLMs, because as you explain that democratizing effect, the barrier to entry is so low that actually companies are pretty quickly having to come up with acceptable uses of large language models and AI enhancement. You can go and enhance your profile on your resume on LinkedIn. You can enhance the job advert you're advertising on LinkedIn. There's any amount of ways of being able to enhance your personal brand in a personal capacity or in a business capacity that actually companies are having to scramble to come up with policies where no regulation exists. So I think it's you've mentioned there about the EU AI Act, which is a really good, encouraging sign. And I'm going to flick on to our second question, which actually relates to, do we think then that the space is tightly or loosely regulated? What do you think needs to happen and why? And I'll ask you, Fiona, first, and then again, throw over to Peggy as we go.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And I'm really interested on Peggy's take on this, especially from the US perspective as well. So regulation, very, very interesting. We're still at that real nascent stages of regulation. We've finally seen movement with that provisional agreement from the EU AI Act at the weekend there. And the aim of that act is to provide, rules for trustworthy AI. And we've also seen movement as well. For example, a couple of weeks ago, we had the AI Safety Summit hosted in the UK, and we also seen the US executive order come out. Previously, we worked with Bank of England and the FCA on the AI forum. And one of the topics that we were asked to explore were the responsible adoption of AI within the financial services. And one of the key outcomes of that report was actually we would like a steer in terms of regulation here because, there was sometimes a bit of a tepid response from organizations on actually implementing machine learning at that time. That was sort of pre-LLMs due to the uncertainty that's around these upcoming regulations. So seeing these come through now can actually be quite useful and maybe move forward the actual implementation of these models. And we're at an evolution stage as well with this. So we're seeing principles come out about good practice of AI, and these are turning into best practice and now into regulations, and we're going to see more come out around standards. For example, how do you audit an ML model? What reporting do you need to do in terms of showing that you've reached a level of security and safety with your models? And standards such as ISO standards coming out, they're all going to help us improve, and that aspect of transparency, data quality, system reliability, and all of these are a way to mitigate against the risks that these models can actually implement. But we're really, really interested to hear Peggy's take on this area.
Yeah, no, Fiona, I think what you said was really fantastic. And I think the timing of this webinar is, especially good because of what was happened Friday. And as you mentioned, in the U.S., I think the priorities have been set by the executive order, and that applies, to the federal agencies to really identify a chief data and AI officer. I think that having that role and responsibility is going to really set the strategy. And then, I think in general, governments are really very aware of, the powerful benefits of these new technologies, but also about protecting the people from any harmful effects of AI bias and unethical usage of data. So really, how do we balance the innovation and collaboration with any negative effects that AI technologies can bring? From my personal opinion, I think a lot of the discussions have been really dominated by the technology companies, and you have, the Googles, the Metas, the OpenAI really dominating the conversation. And from my data perspective, and a lot of what you outlined in your last slide, Fiona, is really going back to what I see as the basic components and capabilities of a data governance framework, and those type of capabilities that we can continue to leverage and expand on when it comes to AI regulation and compliance. And again, just going back to my financial services background, I lived through things like BCBS 239, risk, and really different types of compliance and audits that I've gone through in the past. And for me, it's regulation. It's not a new concept. Anyone, again, that's worked in healthcare or telecom, this is where we have to go lean in again on the policies and controls that we already have in place, the people, the processes that we have around data quality, data remediation, and thinking about data as a whole entire life cycle. And I think that now, how do you apply that same critical thinking into artificial intelligence? It in itself is its own data lifecycle. I think as AI models, as a data product, and how do you govern a data product? You have to really think about it in its domain, it is subject matter expert, and how do you have that process the right artifacts around thinking about the lineage and thinking about the data quality. These all have to come together. And most importantly, I think that we kind of swept it under the cover here, Fiona, but no large language model should exist without the right business context, without the right business use case, and that essentially drives what the data should look like and the purpose and the usage. So I think that all these moving pieces are really important components, but it can all play in the same space of the regulation. And as you said, it's evolving, right? It's going to be put more into fine detail as the months and years go by. But we, as data practitioners, have to have a more forceful opinion about the proper way of doing things. I think that a lot of us can see the train wreck coming in terms of the possible negative impacts, the risk if we don't properly govern AI models today, if we don't properly prepare the data, and if we don't properly govern the outputs and the usage of that data. So we can see the potential negative effects, and we have to proactively, again, talk about the data governance, data quality, and the importance of privacy as it comes to all this in this space.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Peggy. And I think chipping in on that, Jamie and I have been talking about the questions that have come in. I think that there's a relevant question from the floor on this topic. So Jamie, if you'd like to go.
Yeah, so a question's come in. What ethical considerations should be at the forefront when deploying LLMs, particularly in sectors like healthcare and finance, where decisions made by these models can have a significant impact on people? Maybe that could be one for you first, Peggy.
Oh wow! I mean, immediately there's several ethical impacts. I mean, I think immediately when it comes to healthcare, you're talking about the safety decisions that these AI algorithms can make. Transparency for me has always been key in terms of the I always think of AI as going back to my risk modeling days. Those black box, like what exactly is the decision, the rules that were created in this little black box to make those decisions. So I think healthcare is such a relevant area because it's going to affect the people's lives, and I think this is where these AI algorithms have to be done with safety, with transparency, even accountability in terms of who is actually creating and making these data sets that formulate these decisions. So anyone in healthcare and building these AI algorithms, I think that they have even more of a greater responsibility than other industries. So Fiona, I'd love to hear your opinion as well.
Yeah, very, very sensible and rings through. Peggy, I promise I'm not sponsored by the EU AI Act here today, but I'm going to borrow from their framework. So, sensitive, high impact use cases such as healthcare, that would fall within the high risk area in terms of regulation. And as such, there's more stringent controls then around these models. And that's controls, as Peggy has talked about, in terms of the data that goes into these models. So whenever you're talking about healthcare, you're talking about, for example, patients' data, you're talking about sensitive data there, you're talking about PII data there as well. And there's governance not just from an AI perspective, but from a data perspective as well. There's going to be a higher level also in terms of that security aspect as well. So this is protected data, and the security aspect it will be to the fore, and also security about the data, but also on the models there themselves, and also the importance of aspects whenever it is a very high risk area that you're applying it to, is having that human intervention, so that human in the loop as well. So just to add a couple of more things to what Peggy has already said.
I think you're just right, Fiona. I think that that plays nicely into our third and final question to you both, which is essentially to say you've got the clean slate. You can come in and you can consult any of the people in the audience today, any of the people watching this on catch up on a project that relates to setting up LLMs, the use of large language models or any kind of AI machine learning. And I'll ask you first, Fiona. Clearly, human in the loop is going to be a big part of it. How do you avoid those sort of hallucinations and people just accepting it at face value because a computer told them? Where would you start? When the rubber hits the road, where would you start in your advice to a firm, and what would you look for?
So I'm going to be quite boring, and keep it to first principles here, and go back to your data governance. That's a really good place to start. A lot of controls are already there, and there's a lot of processes that we can reuse. we talked at the start of the call about AI policy. So I would suggest to an organisation, if they don't have an AI policy, to start writing that. And really what that does is not about just having a document, it's about gathering together those stakeholders across an organisation, getting buy-in. What Peggy had talked about is, the actual use case that's of business value. So, you're going to cover what applications are going to be implemented, what scenarios, and that really links to the question about these high-risk applications of the technology, and to tease that out at this stage. What ethical principles are going to guide your development and deployment and use, and really that transparency all around your data, how it was built, how it was used, where it came from, what critical data is in here, tagging data of sensitive information and so on, and how that rolls through to having clear explanations for the output of those models. What Peggy has talked about as well is the protection of user data, and that fits along again that home of data governance. How you're complying with relevant regulations, from data protection right through to these new regulations which are coming to the fore now. Who's accountable for all of this? Security plays a big part as well, and training. And I don't mean training of the model, I mean training of the organisation as well, because these models are going to become ubiquitous across all areas. And it is, we talk about risk, Peggy, what you talked about, all that good work around, data and governance and so on, because the barrier to adoption is so low now, it's sort of getting away from, highlighting what could go wrong. So just, inputting all your IP into a closed model in the cloud, and not doing any, machine learning 101 data quality standardization before this will have an impact on the outputs of the model.
You're just right, and I think that there's real considerations. You covered security and quality and governance there as well. I figure that's probably just playing right into your perfect songbook there, Peggy. But yeah, again, if you were advising, if you were giving people that clean slate, and you're saying this is where you should start and this is what you should get right, and you'll guarantee success as a result, what would you add to what Fiona said?
Yes, and I know I only have a few minutes before this webinar ends. So, I think that Fiona covered really the people, process, technology. I'll start with briefly the technology, having that auto discovery, auto classification in place to really understand your entire data landscape, having your data all properly labeled, and you can automate the controls, the policies, the management. It goes into your quality and a lineage. So that whole flow allows for that consistency. And looking at processes, a lot of data management activities are done manually in terms of classifying your data, looking through your unstructured data, how much manual time are your data stewards really looking at the information, really rethink that process. And then lastly, really the people part is, and as Fiona said, educating the workforce, really how do you upskill your workforce to really rethink and apply these new AI technologies so that the human in the loop can be proactive in terms of protecting and securing your data. And these are all important components that's necessary for being successful in your AI strategy and implementation.
That's very succinct, very, very impressive. And you're quite right. We've 1 minute left. And Jamie had one follow-up question, I think, which related to the next year. And I think it's going to be a one-sentence thing for each of you. So go for it, Jamie.
Yeah, so in what ways do both companies plan to stay ahead of emerging trends in the industry? and continuously innovate to meet those evolving needs of the financial sector?
Wow. I mean, I think it's just about continuing to learn and network with your peers in AI, and to be active in learning about these new technologies.
And Fiona?
I'm going to touch on what Peggy had highlighted. It's, where's areas that you can automate. So where's areas that are probably quite boring manual at the moment, and how can we automate those. So I think that's usually our modus operandi for machine learning.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So it gives me a great pleasure to thank you both for your contributions. We could have probably carried on talking for another hour easily, but I'm not sure anybody would have indulged us for quite so long. But what we will do is we'll try and reconvene maybe in the new year and on a similar topic. People, if you'd like to follow up with Peggy, you've got her contact details there on screen, similar for Fiona, and equally, if you would like to reach out to BigID or to Datactics, you can see their details on the screen now. Thank you so much, both Peggy and Fiona, and to Jamie also, for your contributions today, and obviously to all of you who've dialed in and have played a part in our discussion. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you all again in the future. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.